News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris. There's your closing bell for this Tuesday on Wall Street, which saw its worst session since April. Renewed tensions over Greenland and tariffs sent gold to a record high. It sunk stocks, bonds, the dollar, and Bitcoin. We bring you those closing numbers each day here at Bloomberg. The S&P 500 lost 143 points. NASDAQ lost 561 points. The Dow lost 871 points. The 10-year Treasury yield at 4.29%. The 2-year yield at 3.59%. Checking NYMEX crude oil, it is up 1.5%. Brent crude is flat, and COMEX gold up 3.6%. Bitcoin down 3.6%. Netflix shares are 1% lower in the post-market after delivering fourth-quarter results that largely beat Wall Street estimates, but issued a cautious forecast for the months ahead, citing higher program spending and the cost of closing its deal with Warner Brothers Discovery. Netflix says it plans to boost spending on programs this year, and that's likely to crimp profits. Now, more on the markets just ahead, but first, President Trump says ICE agents sometimes make mistakes, even as he broadly defended his migrant crackdown.
You know, they're going to make mistakes sometimes. ICE is going to be too rough with somebody, or, you know, they're dealing with rough people. They're going to make a mistake. Sometimes it can happen. We feel terribly.
Polls show public support for Trump's hardline immigration agenda is declining. Now we're learning federal prosecutors have subpoenaed Minnesota officials, including Governor Tim Walz, Attorney General Keith Ellison, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, St. Paul Mayor Kelly Herr, and officials in Ramsey and Hennepin counties. Walz and Frey have called the probe a bullying tactic meant to threaten political opposition. Now, back to what's moved the markets today. President Trump's demands to take over Greenland have transformed the World Economic Forum's annual meeting in Davos, Switzerland, into an emergency diplomatic summit. Denmark's pension fund for teachers is planning to exit U.S. Treasuries at the end of the month. The fund's chief investment officer tells Bloomberg the U.S. is basically not a good credit. Guggenheim Partners chief investment officer Ann Walsh says that could be more of a sentimental move.
Where do you invest when there's such uncertainty? It hasn't really settled into the markets because I think there's really a sense that perhaps this will all settle down.
Ann Walsh of Guggenheim Partners spoke with Bloomberg from Davos. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is urging patience.
I tell everyone, sit back, take a deep breath, do not retaliate. Do not retaliate. The president will be here tomorrow. And again, also have an open mind.
Treasury Secretary Bessent on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum's annual meeting with Fox Business Conversation. Former White House economic advisor Gary Cohn says he understands the president's ambition.
If we want to expand our air defenses, Greenland is a pretty strategic spot. So I understand what the president's interest is.
And UK Chancellor of the Exchequer Rachel Reeves says Britain wants to reduce tensions with the U.S. over Trump's threat of tariffs ahead of his arrival in Davos.
All of our focus is on de-escalation, not in worst-case scenarios. We have worked incredibly closely with President Trump the last year because we believe it's in our UK national interest to do so.
Trade Representative Jameson Greer says the trade has been lopsided between the U.S. and the rest of the world.
Europe has done nothing to implement the trade deal. We modified our tariffs to be much lower. We cut them a deal on autos that other people don't have. Europeans have not lowered a single tariff for us.
And French President Emmanuel Macron says U.S. tariffs used as leverage against sovereignty are unacceptable.
Without collective governance, cooperation gives way to relentless competition. Competition from the United States of America through trade agreements that undermine our export interests, demand maximum concessions, and openly aim to weaken and subordinate Europe, combined with an endless accumulation of new tariffs that are fundamentally unacceptable.
And Finnish President Alexander Stubb says there is a short-term need to de-escalate language on Greenland. He says he's been talking with President Trump about this.
I think now what we need to do is to bring down the temperature. We need to find an off-ramp and probably create some kind of a process which will strengthen Arctic security. And sort of at the end of the tunnel, I wish we could have a NATO summit in Ankara where we all agree on a new Arctic security structure.
Finland President Stubb talked with Bloomberg Surveillance on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos. Hawaii is one of several states that outlaw carrying your gun into a store or restaurant unless the owner specifically allows it. A group of Hawaiian gun owners asked the Supreme Court to overturn that law. They say it's a violation of their Second Amendment gun rights. Justice Samuel Alito asked why the law is even necessary.
Why does it matter if store owners and owners of private property that are generally open to the public don't like guns? Why is it a big deal to say they want people carrying guns to stay out? Just put up a sign.
Attorney Alan Beck represents the gun owners. Justice Sonia Sotomayor questioned him on his interpretation of the law.
You say that there is a constitutional right to carry a gun on private property?
Yes.
I've never seen that right.
Carrying on private property that's open to the public.
The court's decision is expected by this summer. That's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg.